The night was silent. Only the wind moved between the broken walls of the ruined street. On the cold ground, a young alien girl curled herself into a small shape, trying to fight against the sharp bite of the stones beneath her. Her skin was thin, and her bones hurt with every breath. For 16 nights she had slept there, on the hard stones, with no blanket, no shelter, and no hope. She was not from this world. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, her hair silver like dust under the moon. Once she had been part of a proud people, but now she was nothing more than a shadow thrown away. She was weak, hungry, and her voice was silent because no one cared to listen. Humans passed her during the day, some with pity, most with cruel laughter at night when the city was empty. She was alone with the stones and the endless cold. Her heart carried the weight of shame, for even her own kind had abandoned her. She whispered to herself each night, counting the stars above. 1 star for 1 night, she told herself. When I reach 17, something must change. But as the nights went by, nothing changed. Only the stones welcomed her, hard and unfeeling, on the 16th night. Her body was too weak to move. She pressed her face against the stone, feeling its roughness cut her cheek. Tears slid silently, mixing with the dirt. Her thoughts wandered between the world she had lost and the cruel reality that now trapped her. The sound of footsteps suddenly broke the silence. Her body tensed, her heart raced. She knew that footsteps at night often meant trouble. She had been kicked, chased, and mocked before. Her fragile body trembled, ready to run, though she had nowhere to go. From the darkness, a shadow appeared, tall and human. The man's face was hidden under the dim streetlight. He stood there, not speaking, only watching her. The girl closed her eyes, waiting for harsh words or worse, but none came. Instead, something small dropped onto the stones near her hand. The smell of food reached her nosebread, simple and warm. Her eyes opened in shock. The man had placed food for her and then turned away. Walking into the shadows without a word, she stared at the bread, afraid it was a trick, but hunger screamed louder than fear. Slowly she took it, biting carefully. It was the first kindness she had tasted in many days. All night, she could not sleep. Her mind returned again and again to the shadow of the man. Why had he not spoken? Why had he helped her? Humans had only given her pain before. Could one of them be different? The stones pressed against her back, hard as always, but her heart carried a strange warmth now. A dangerous hope when she did not want to feel hope. Was painful because it could break so easily, yet she could not stop herself from whispering, "Tomorrow. Maybe he will come back." The wind grew colder. The night stretched long. Her fragile body curled tighter, bones shaking under the weight of despair and fragile hope. The stars above burned silently, watching her. 16 nights had passed, and she was still alive. 16 nights on the stones, and still she waited. But tomorrow would be the 17th, and in her heart, the faintest spark whispered that something would finally change. The 17th night began with silence. The alien girl sat on the stones, hugging her knees close to her chest. Her stomach ached with hunger, but her mind was restless. All day, she had thought of the man who had left food for her. His shadow refused to leave her memory. Humans were dangerous. She had learned this lesson many times. They shouted at her, pushed her, and sometimes even threw stones. But that one man had done none of those things. He had not spoken. He had not hurt her. He had only left food and walked away. Why? Her silver eyes searched the street again and again. The lamps flickered. The wind carried dust. Shadows stretched long against the broken walls. Every sound of footsteps made her heart beat faster. She told herself not to hope, but her chest betrayed her. Deep inside, she wanted to see him again. The night grew colder. Her thin arms trembled as she rubbed them for warmth. She pressed her cheek against her knees and whispered to herself, "Maybe he will not come." Maybe it was only once. The stones beneath her offered no comfort. They were hard, cold, and silent, as they had always been. Then she heard it. Footsteps, slow and steady. her head lifted, eyes wide. The same tall figure appeared at the end of the street. He walked quietly, his face still hidden in the shadows of the lamp. She froze, unable to speak, her heart caught between fear and longing. He stopped a few steps away. For a moment, neither of them moved. The night air held its breath. Then he lowered his hand, and again something dropped to the stones near her. Not just bread this time, meat, wrapped in cloth, warm with steam. The smell made her mouth water instantly. She looked up at him with disbelief. Her lips trembled, but no words came. He did not speak either. Instead, he crouched low, not too close but not far. The lamp above flickered, and for the first time, she saw his eyes. They were human eyes, yes, but not filled with hate or cruelty. They held something different, quiet concern. The girl lowered her gaze quickly, not daring to meet them for long. Her hands shook as she took the food. She whispered softly, almost afraid her voice would break the silence. "Why?" The man tilted his head slightly, but still said nothing. Instead, he placed another small item on the ground, a folded blanket. The girl gasped, staring at it as if it were gold. She had not touched softness in so many nights. Her breath caught in her chest, but still, she did not reach for it. What if it was a trick? What if kindness turned into pain? The man stood up slowly, as if to say he meant no harm. Then he stepped back into the shadows, leaving her with food and the blanket. Her silver eyes followed him until his figure disappeared into the night. The street was empty again, but now it no longer felt the same. The girl touched the blanket carefully. The fabric was rough but warm. Her body trembled as she pulled it around herself. For the first time in 16 nights, she did not feel the stones biting into her skin. Tears welled in her eyes. But these tears were different. They were not only of pain. They were of something she had almost forgotten: hope. That night, she ate slowly, savoring every bite. Her stomach filled for the first time in many days. The blanket held her like gentle arms. She looked at the stars above and whispered, 17 nights. And finally, something changed. Yet questions filled her mind. Who was the man? Why did he not speak? Why would a human care for her at all? Her people had left her. The city hated her. But this stranger had given her warmth. Was it pity? Was it kindness? Or something she could not yet name? The wind whispered across the ruined street. The stones were still there, cold and cruel beneath her. But now they no longer felt like her only companions. Somewhere in the shadows, there was a man who had looked at her without hate. Somewhere close there was someone who had seen her suffering, and maybe, just maybe, he would return again. The 17th night carried a strange weight in the air. The alien girl sat wrapped in the blanket he had left, her silver eyes wide and restless. The stones beneath her were still hard, but they no longer cut as deep. The cloth gave her a thin shield against the cruelty of the ground, and the food in her belly gave her enough strength to wait. She had told herself many times not to hope. Hope was dangerous, because it always broke. But tonight, her heart betrayed her. It beat faster with every sound of the wind, with every shadow that moved. Her gaze returned again and again to the corner of the street, the place where the man had appeared. When the footsteps came, her body tensed, her breath caught in her throat. Yes, slow and steady, the sound she remembered. The tall figure stepped out of the dark. This time, he did not stop a few steps away. He came closer, until his shadow stretched long across the stones. The girl lowered her eyes quickly, her hands clinging to the blanket as if it could hide her. The man crouched down again, but this time, he did not place food on the ground. Instead, he spoke. His voice was quiet, low, steady. "You can't stay here," he said. Her heart jumped at the sound. She had almost forgotten how human words sounded when they were not cruel. She did not answer, her lips trembling. He continued, his eyes calm but firm. "It's too cold, too dangerous. You will not survive another night on these stones." The girl's throat tightened. Her instinct screamed not to trust him, not to follow. But the memory of 16 nights of pain, hunger, and cold burned inside her. He extended his hand. Toward her, not forcing, not grabbing, only offering. She stared at it, frozen. Her people had cast her away. Humans had pushed her down. No one had ever offered a hand to her before. Her chest ached as if a wall inside her was cracking. "Girl," whispered, her voice small. "Why?" The man did not answer directly. Instead, he looked at her as though the question itself pained him. Then he said softly, "Because no one should be left on the stones." Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at his hand again, shaking. Inside, if she took it, everything would change. If she refused, she would return to the cold and endless nights, slowly, carefully, as though touching fire. She placed her hand in his warmth. That was the first thing she felt. His hand was rough, calloused from work, but warm. Her body trembled, not from fear this time, but from something else, something new. He pulled her gently to her feet. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, but before she could reach for it, he picked it up and wrapped it around her again. His movements were simple, but to her, they felt like a gift. Together they walked, her bare feet brushing against the cold ground. She stumbled once, but he steadied her with a light touch. The street grew quieter as they moved away from the ruins. The lamps dimmed, the shadows grew longer. At last they stopped in front of a small, old house. It was not grand, not rich, but to her, it looked like a palace. He opened the door. The wood creaking softly. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with the faint smell of bread and smoke. Her silver eyes darted around quickly. The walls were plain, the furniture simple, but in the corner stood a bed soft, wide, covered in cloth. Her breath caught. 16 nights on stone, and now, before her, stood something she thought she would never touch again. The man stepped aside, his voice low. "Rest," he said. She hesitated, standing at the doorway. Her feet refused to move. Her mind screamed warnings. This could be a trap, but her body was breaking, her bones begging for rest. Slowly she stepped inside. The blanket still clung to her. She touched the edge of the bed with trembling fingers. The fabric was soft, far softer than the cold stone that had been her prison. Her knees grew weak, and she sat down. The warmth seeped into her tired body. Her eyes closed for a moment, and tears slipped free. The man said nothing more. He only placed a small jug of water and a loaf of bread on the table near her. Then he turned away, giving her space. For the first time in many nights, no fear pressed against her chest. No cruel laughter followed her, no cold stone bit into her skin. Instead, there was softness, silence, and the strange presence of a human who had not harmed her. As she lay back, pulling the blanket close, she whispered to herself with a trembling smile, 17 nights. And I have a bed. The stars outside the window shone faintly, but she no longer needed to count them. For the first time in a long time, she closed her eyes, and she dreamed not of sorrow, but of tomorrow. The morning light crept slowly into the small house. The alien girl opened her eyes, blinking against the warmth of sunlight. For a moment, she did not move. The softness beneath her body felt unreal. After so many nights on stone, the bed seemed like a dream she did not want to lose. She sat up, holding the blanket close around her shoulders. Her silver eyes scanned the room with quiet caution. The man was there, near the table, repairing something with his hands. His movements were calm, steady, almost silent. When he noticed her awake, he only nodded once. Not forcing words, the girl's throat tightened. Her body wanted to thank him, but her voice refused. Years of fear and cruelty had stolen the habit of speaking. Instead, she lowered her gaze, afraid to meet his eyes for too long. The man placed a loaf of bread and a jug of water on the table. "Eat," he said simply, his voice quiet but firm. She hesitated, her hands clutching the blanket tighter. Food often came with a price. She had learned that truth the hard way. But he turned back to his work, not watching her, not asking anything. Slowly, carefully, she stood and moved to the table. Her fingers shook as she picked up the bread. The taste was plain, but it filled her body with warmth. Her eyes watered, though she did not know why. For a long time, silence filled the room. The man worked, the girl ate. The only sound was the soft crackle of fire from the hearth. It was the first silence she had ever felt that was not cruel. Not heavy, not threatening, just quiet. When her hunger was eased, she sat back, clutching the blanket, her mind filled with questions she could not ask. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? Why had he not driven her away like all the others? Her people had abandoned her, humans had mocked her, and yet this one man treated her as though she was human too. Later, when the day grew long, the man finally spoke. Again, "What is your name?" he asked. The words struck her like a storm. Her name, something she had not spoken for so long. Something she had buried deep, afraid that saying it would make her a target. She hesitated, her lips trembling. At last she whispered, so soft he had to lean closer to hear. "Leora." Her name fell into the air like a fragile secret. The man nodded slowly, repeating it once. "Leora." He did not laugh, he did not mock. He spoke it with respect, as though it mattered. The girl's chest ached at the sound. Her name still had meaning, still had a place in the world, and for the first time, she felt a small thread of trust pulling inside her. Days passed slowly. Each morning, she woke in the bed, her body still amazed by its softness. Each evening, the man returned with food or small items she needed. He spoke little, and when he did, his words were simple, but his silence was never heavy. In that silence, she began to heal. One night, as rain tapped against the window, she sat by the fire while the man mended his boots. Her silver eyes watched him quietly. At last she whispered, her voice thin but stronger than before, "Why do you help me?" The man paused, his hands stilling on the leather. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he answered, without looking up, "Because someone should have helped you long before me." Her eyes widened, tears blurring her vision. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her suffering as something undeserved. For years, she had believed she was worthless, forgotten. Now his words cracked the walls around her heart, slowly, painfully, but surely. The days grew into weeks. Leora began to trust the bed, the food, the silence, and the man who asked nothing of her. Still, the fear inside her had not fully died. Sometimes, when footsteps echoed outside, her body froze in panic. Sometimes when shadows stretched too long, she clutched the blanket and hid. The man never forced her, never pushed her to speak more than she wanted. Instead, he offered quiet presence, a steady anchor in a storm she still carried inside. One evening, she found herself whispering another truth. "I thought humans hated me." The man looked at her for a long time. His voice was steady when he answered, "Not all do." The words were simple, but to her, they were a new world. Her people had told her she was nothing. Humans had told her she was a monster. But he told her something else, something she had never believed possible. In the silence of the small house, trust began to grow, not quickly, not loudly, but like a seed breaking through stone. It whispered in the warmth of the fire. It whispered in the taste of bread. It whispered in her name, spoken with respect. And though Leora still carried scars deep inside, for the first time she wondered if she might not carry them alone. The days inside the small house passed like quiet rivers. Leora was no longer sleeping on stones, no longer counting stars with trembling lips. The bed held her, the blanket warmed her, and for the first time in many nights, she dreamed of mornings that did not hurt, but her body still carried memories written not in words, but in scars. One evening, when the fire burned low, the man returned from the market. His clothes were wet from the rain, his boots heavy with mud. He placed food on the table, bread and fruit, and then sat silently to dry his hands. Leora moved slowly from the corner where she had been sitting, her blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. She reached for the bread, but as she did, the edge of the blanket slipped. Her thin arm was revealed, pale skin stretched over old scars, long lines rough and uneven. carved deep into her flesh. Man froze, his eyes falling on the marks. Leora gasped and pulled the blanket back quickly, pressing it hard against her body. Her silver eyes widened in panic. Her breath short and fast. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. "Don't look." Her hands shook, clutching the fabric as if it could erase what he had seen. The man did not move closer. He did not ask questions. Instead, his voice came softly, steady as stone. "Whoever gave you those scars, they cannot touch you here." Her heart pounded. She had expected disgust, pity, or cruel curiosity, but his words carried none of those, only calm assurance. Still, she shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They will find me. They always find me." Her body curled tighter, her shoulders shaking. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the terror buried deep inside her. The man leaned forward slightly, his voice low but firm. "Not while I am here." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the crackle of fire and the steady beat of rain against the window. Leora's hands loosened slowly, though her eyes still carried storms. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever promised to protect her. Later that night, when she finally lay down in the bed, she did not sleep. Her mind replayed his words again and again. Each time, the sharpness of fear dulled just a little, but the scars still burned. They were not only on her skin, they were inside her, carved deep into her soul. The next morning, as the first light broke through the window, the man entered quietly, carrying a small box. Inside were herbs, clean cloth, and ointments. He placed them on the table and said simply, "Let me help." Leora froze, clutching the blanket tighter. Her voice shook. "No, I don't want you to see." The man's gaze did not waver. "You don't have to show me everything," he said. "Just let me ease the pain." Her lips trembled, her body torn between fear and the aching need for relief. The scars on her arms burned each time she moved. Her back ached when she lay down too long. She wanted the pain to stop, but the thought of exposing herself again filled her with dread. Slowly, carefully, she extended her arm from the blanket. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, refusing to meet his. The man's touch was gentle, his hands steady. He cleaned the wounds with water, applied ointment, and wrapped them in clean cloth. Each movement was slow, careful, as though he feared breaking something fragile. Leora's breath caught, her chest tight, but she did not pull away. Instead, tears rolled silently down her cheeks, not from pain, but from the strangeness of his kindness. When he finished, he stepped back, giving her space. "You are stronger than you think," he said quietly. She lifted her eyes, confused. "I'm weak," she whispered. "I couldn't fight them. I couldn't stop them." His gaze was steady as he answered, "You survived." Those two words struck her harder than any wound. She had never thought of it that way. Surviving had always felt like failure, but in his voice, it sounded like strength. That night, as the fire warmed the room, she whispered her name again. "Leora," she said softly, almost to remind herself it was still hers. The man repeated it, his tone the same as before. Not pity, not command, only respect, and for the first time, she did not flinch at the sound, but shadows still lingered. Outside, rumors whispered through the streets. Slavers had begun asking questions, searching for the lost alien girl. Leora felt the fear rising again. Her scars reminded her of what they would do if they caught her. She wanted to run, to vanish into the night, but when she looked at the man, at the quiet strength in his eyes, a small voice inside her whispered something new. Maybe she did not have to run anymore. The quiet days inside the small house did not last forever. Leora had begun to trust the bed, the bread, and the silence of the man who protected her. Her body was healing, her wounds carefully cleaned and wrapped, but the scars on her soul remained, whispering warnings that peace never lasted. And one evening her fears proved true. As the man prepared the fire, he spoke in his usual calm voice. Strangers have been asking questions in the market. Leora froze where she sat near the table, her silver eyes wide, her fingers gripped the blanket so tight it almost tore. Questions? She whispered, her voice thin. The man nodded once, his face steady but serious. They ask about an alien girl. Alone, weak, marked with scars. Her heart dropped, the blood drained from her face. She knew instantly who it was. The slavers, those who had broken her body, those who had left her to die. They found me, she whispered, trembling. Her chest rose and fell too fast, panic clawing at her throat. I have to go, she cried, standing quickly. I can't stay, they will hurt you too. The man stood and blocked the doorway, his tall frame silent, but unshaken. You will not run, he said firmly. His voice was not cruel, but strong like stone. Leora shook her head desperately. You don't understand. If they find me here, they will kill you. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. Then let them try. Her lips parted in shock. Her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anyone stand for her before. All her life, people had turned away or joined in her suffering. But here was a man who looked into her fear and refused to let it rule. Still, her body shook, her mind trapped in old chains. At night, she dreamed of hands dragging her back, of stones harder than ever. She would wake in the bed gasping, clutching the blanket like armor, and always, she would find the man awake, sitting near the door, watching the shadows outside. He never said it, but she knew he was guarding her. Days turned heavy with tension. Each knock at the neighbor's door made her flinch. Each sound in the street made her heart race. The man continued his work quietly, but she noticed his eyes scanning more often. He bought extra wood for the door, checked the locks, and sharpened tools that could become weapons. He did not speak of fear, but his silence carried preparation. One afternoon, as rain darkened the sky, Leora stood at the window. Children ran in the street, laughing, their voices light and free. She pressed her hand to the glass, her eyes heavy. I will bring them danger, she whispered. I should not stay. The man turned to her, his voice steady. You deserve to live without running. Her throat tightened, tears burning her eyes, but she said nothing more. Her silence spoke enough. That night, the danger finally came closer. Voices echoed in the street, harsh and searching. Boots struck against stone, heavy and cruel. Leora's body froze. Her blood turned to ice. She knew those voices. She knew those boots. The slavers. The man moved quickly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Stay inside, he whispered, but she shook her head violently. No, if they see me here, they'll burn your house. They'll take me away. Her body trembled so badly she could barely stand. I can't let you be hurt because of me. He looked at her with calm fire in his eyes. You think they frighten me? He asked. They are. Men who prey on the weak. But you are not weak anymore. Leora's tears spilled freely. She shook her head, unable to believe. I am broken, she whispered. But the man's voice cut through her despair. No, you are surviving. The boots grew louder outside. Voices shouted, demanding doors be opened. The man tightened his jaw, then turned to her one last time. If they come, I will stand, he said. You do not need to go back to the stones, not ever again. Her chest ached so deeply she could hardly breathe. This man, this human, was willing to risk everything for her. The girl who had been left with nothing. The girl who had been broken and thrown away. Her fingers clutched the blanket tighter, but this time, it was not for fear. It was to hold on to the truth that someone had finally chosen to fight for her. Outside, the shadows of the slavers grew longer. Their voices rose. Their boots struck louder. The quiet house shook under the weight of danger. And Leora realized with trembling certainty, the 17th night had given her a bed. But now, the coming night would test if she truly had a place in this world. The night outside the small house was alive with danger. Heavy boots struck the street. Sharp voices cut through the silence. The slavers had arrived. Searching, hunting. determined to take back what they believed was theirs. Inside, Leora stood, frozen, her heart beating so loud it drowned the crackle of the fire. The man stood by the door, his shoulders broad, his eyes calm yet fierce. In one hand, he held an iron tool from his work, rough but strong enough to defend. In the other, he tightened the wooden lock across the door. He looked back once at Leora, his voice steady as stone. "Stay behind me," he said. Leora's breath trembled. She wanted to argue, to tell him she should run, but her voice broke under the weight of fear. Her silver eyes shone with tears. She whispered instead, "They will kill you." The man shook his head firmly. "Not tonight." The slavers' voices grew louder. Closer, they banged on doors, shouting for the alien girl with silver eyes. Neighbors peeked through windows, some shrinking back in fear, others whispering to each other. The sound of boots stopped outside the small house. Then came the pounding, fists striking the wood like thunder. "Open!" A voice barked. "We know she's here," Leora gasped, clutching the blanket so tightly her fingers hurt. Her knees trembled, her chest rising and falling in panic. She wanted to scream, to beg him to let her run, but her feet would not move. Her body was caught between terror and something stronger. The memory of his words, "You are not weak anymore." The door shook again under the pounding. The man's jaw tightened when he spoke. His voice was loud enough to carry beyond the walls. "She is not yours." Silence followed, sharp and cold, then laughter, cruel and mocking. "She belongs to us," the slaver shouted back. "She is marked, she is broken, we made her. And she will return." Leora's tears burned her cheeks. Every word stabbed into her chest, reminding her of the chains, the pain, the stones. Her body wanted to collapse. But then she looked at the man, standing tall, unshaken, and she realized he did not believe those words. He did not see her as broken. He saw her as someone worth protecting. The slavers kicked the door, splinters cracking under the force. The man raised his weapon, eyes steady. "If you want her, you'll go through me," he said. And then something happened that neither Leora nor the slavers expected. The neighbors stepped into the street, one by one, old men, women, even children, faces that had once turned away. They stood in silence, watching, and slowly, some of them moved closer, carrying tools, sticks, or nothing but their voices. "She is not yours," one neighbor said. Echoing the man's words, "She stays," said another. The slavers snarled, realizing the shadows of the street were no longer on their side. The quiet house was no longer alone. It was guarded by more than one, and for the first time Leora saw humans standing together, not in cruelty, but in defiance of it. The slavers cursed and threatened, but their boots began to back away. They were hunters, but even hunters feared when the forest turned against them. Their voices faded into the distance, swallowed by the night, until the only sound left was the whisper of the wind. Leora collapsed to her knees, her body shaking with sobs. The man turned, kneeling in front of her. His hand rested gently on her shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. She looked up at him through tears. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Why? Why? Would you fight for me?" His answer was simple, "Because you deserve more than stones." Her chest ached with a pain that was no longer despair. It was something new, something warm. She reached out, trembling, and for the first time she did not hesitate to take his hand. The warmth of his rough palm filled her with strength. In that touch she understood she was no longer alone. That night, when the street grew quiet again, she lay once more on the bed. The same bed that had welcomed her on the 17th night. But now it felt different. It was not just a bed of cloth and wood. It was a place of belonging, a place of safety. Her silver eyes closed slowly, and as sleep pulled her gently, she whispered to herself, "No more stones." The stars outside still burned in the sky, but she no longer counted them. She no longer begged them for change. For change had come, not from the heavens, but from a human heart, and those scars still marked her skin. though shadows still lurked in distant streets. She had found something stronger than fear, a bond that made her believe in tomorrow. And for the first time, she truly dreamed of a future.